All right, I want to welcome everybody to another episode of the Shadows podcast. I am your host, Trip Bodenheimer, and I am excited today to have with me. I want to make sure I pronounce your last name right.
It's Thayer. I always wonder when my dad would say Thayer and then T as in Tom, Hayer, because it sounds like fair on the phone or
Yeah.
microphones or whatever. So yeah, it's Thayer. Yeah.
Okay, good. That's how I was going to pronounce it. Craig
Yeah.
Thayer.
Perfect.
All
Perfect.
right. And he's a Christian trauma surgeon, motivational speaker. He co-hosts a radio show, and he's also an author, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. But welcome to the Shadows.
Well, thank you very much. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. A lot to unpack with your story. Well, first, I want to start off with some. Well, actually, you know what? Before I do rapid fires, where are you located?
I'm in close to Dalton, Georgia.
How far is that from Atlanta?
It's about 86 miles or so. So it's about, I mean, traffic wise, it could be 2 hours or it could be an hour and a half.
Okay. Yeah, we go to Atlanta. Good. I think we're actually going to Atlanta the time of recording this on Sunday for a Braves game. So
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
constant spot
Yeah.
for us.
Yeah, good team. First year we were here, they won the Major League Championship, World Championship, so World Series.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
That's a
Georgia
couple of years ago,
football,
2 years ago.
yeah, college won their national title, and yeah, I mean everybody was was doing really well professionally,
Are you
and
starting to rock Georgia shirts?
yeah. Well, we're so close to the Tennessee border. I almost want to come up with one that's half orange and one that's half red,
Yeah.
just so I can,
Yeah. Or
be
just
neutral
depending
with
on where you
everybody.
are, wear that one.
Yeah. So I'll be friendly with either side.
There you go. All right. So now we'll go through some rapid fire questions for you. First, favorite movie, your go-to movie to watch.
Go-to movie. Man. You know what? I gotta say it's changed. I think it's now Maverick, the Top Gun movie,
I
because it's
still
just so
haven't seen it.
it's so patriotic.
Yeah.
And I kind of always wanted to be a fighter pilot, but then working at a veterans hospital, a real one came in flying F-16s back then, and said, "Nope, no go. You're too tall." Because you
Gotcha.
had a canopy on the way out. So I couldn't be a flight surgeon and fly planes, but oh well, wasn't meant to be.
I'm ashamed to say I've yet to watch it. I think the original Top Gun was one of my dad's favorite movies, and I really liked it.
Yeah,
Uh, and I have not had time to watch Maverick. So I'm
yeah,
hopefully the time this releases, it's changed. So if people start giving me crap.
yeah.
All right. Well,
That's,
next question for you. I read somewhere you were a notorious prankster.
I am. Yes,
Am okay, not were,
I
still am.
I still am. Yeah, yeah.
I can appreciate that. I'm anybody who's worked with me uh knows how enjoyable that can be at times. So
Yeah.
best prank that you played on somebody.
I think it's the one in the book. To lighten it up, I put some pranks in there. So I was at UC Davis, and it was my freshman year. We're in a 5-story dorm, and they had two parallel hallways. The rooms are on the outside of on the edge of the building, and in the middle was the bathroom, uh, showers, laundry, all tiled, and then sinks and stuff. And so we had been pranked by the fourth floor all girl floor. So this isn't just out of nowhere. And we retaliated the first one with lifting a manhole cover and putting it in the middle of the hallway, which neither housekeeping nor any of the ladies could move.
Right.
So,
That's
but that
great.
that that then resulted in them putting peanut butter in our toothpaste. So we were wondering if on the fourth floor the girls hearing a fire alarm would come out of their rooms, go down the stairs, assemble out front to be accounted for, or whether they'd go into the bathroom, apply makeup, and so we had a plug-in bell that sounded like a fire alarm. We had video cameras. We had so we needed two people inside the bathroom to film, one to film and one to do the alarm. And then we had collected, being at an ag school, some material from the cow barns and spread that all over the sinks, the floor, the mirror, with enough space so they wouldn't slip on it and get to the sink. So the alarm goes off. Sure enough, they all gather. and they put on their makeup, they go downstairs, they gather outside, they realize they're the only ones out there. We have them filmed standing out there all by themselves. And because the bathrooms are all tile and a hose, housekeeping just hoses everything down. We had that place hosed down and clean with no evidence by the time they
Wow.
walk back upstairs.
How spot on was housekeeping there if you're able to get all that up?
Yeah, I mean, they got drains in the middle of the floors and it all went down. So
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah, nothing to see here.
nothing to see here. I don't know what you're talking about.
I highly doubt this person's listening, and I really hope they are. But this happened about 10 years ago. I went on a trip. We are training for about a month, and one of the guys that was there, we were meeting in the hotel gym. And I was on the phone with my wife, and he came to my room freaking out. We're gonna work out like 10 o'clock at night. And he was freaking out, and he's like, yeah, I need you to come down there. He's like, the guy at the front desk, I think, is hitting on me. And he's like, he walked by and asked me my room number and then just kind of like giggled and walked off. And I think he's hitting on me. And he really, got that in his head. And so what I did was I got back to my room after we worked out and I called his room and I just breathed in the phone. And he hung up and he started texting me. He's like, dude, he's calling my room. And he's like, I could hear the lobby music playing, even though there was no music in my room. And so for a month, I started to get other people in on this, and we would just he started to catch on. He's like, I think it's you. So what I
Yeah.
did is I had someone else. I went to his room and I said, I'm going to his room in 5 minutes. I need you to call and not say a word. And so I'm sitting there in his room. We're about to go out to dinner or something, and I'm just sitting there playing on my phone. And the phone rings, and he looks at me and then looks at it and he picks up and he's like, dude, I'm so sorry. I thought that was you. Oh my gosh, this guy is freaking me out.
That's
For
perfect. Yeah.
for a month, he refused to go eat breakfast in the mornings down in the lobby. So he skipped his complimentary breakfast. He refused to go through the front door. He started to leave through the pool, and he refused to work out at the hotel gym. And I still never told him about that. And like five people were in on it with me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but he'll every now and then, like he would message me and be like, "Man, I still can't get over that dude at the hotel. I
Yeah.
wonder if anything ever happened to him." But yeah,
Yeah.
so
No, that's good. That was perfect. You have to, that kind of reminded me of one that was in residency when I was an intern. We had pagers that had a voice thing in it. So, but it
yeah,
was delayed by 30 seconds. So I page on it, John, who was one of my intern partners, your fly's down. And he's wearing scrubs, so his fly's not down.
yeah,
But then
yeah,
I
yeah.
walk in the room, like, and he's talking to, she's probably 18, just a really attractive lady and or girl at 18. Uh, and sure enough, I'm standing there, and suddenly my voice, which is garbled because it's a horrible speaker, your fly's down, and he's all embarrassed, and I'm like, oh, I guess you're too busy. I'll leave.
See, I can appreciate
Yeah,
good
yeah, yeah,
pranks. And
yeah.
now you gotta be careful with all that stuff. But
No,
yeah,
yeah, because my boys see that, and I'm like, you need to plan every possible how it could go wrong because it's yeah. I remember my roommate had a marshmallow and he was squeezing it for like an hour and then he was going to have it stick to the window, but it got so firm from doing that it literally broke the front window to the dorm. Yeah,
wow,
not intentional, but it's like those are the things you got to think about.
yeah, yeah. All right, well, we probably do a whole episode on those.
Yeah,
Uh, what is a
yeah.
fear that you have?
Sure. I hate heights, although I go on a what we call a death march every year.
Yeah,
It's a backpack trip across the Sierras, and usually about between. I think we've had a minimum of 5 guys, and then 13 went with us one year. So yeah, it's just we're on trail the first day, and then we're off trail the next 6, and last day we're back on trail and find cars at the end of our trip and drive back. But yeah, I just don't look down, and peer pressure is key.
yeah.
And I make
It
sure
is.
I'm not the last one coming down because I may not come down. So someone has to, push me along the way behind me.
Or don't do a prank on somebody and then expect them to help you down there.
No, exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Book recommendation outside of yours for our audience.
Um, geez, I think Necessary Endings is one I went through recently. It has some really interesting and good points about relationships and especially more recently, I was involved with a couple of narcissists, and the chapter on, I think it's like hero, villain, and narcissists are
Yeah.
very important to read. So,
Okay. Necessary Endings. Have you read The Narcissist I Know?
no, I haven't.
It's a great book.
Okay, I'll have to look that one up.
Each chapter is about like a certain type of narcissist, like the I know everything narcissist. So it's
Right.
really good. You don't have to read it in chronological order. You can kind of jump around the
Yeah,
people
yeah.
you deal with. Final question. Dinner for three. Three historical figures who are no longer with us. Who do you break bread with?
Jesus has always got to be there.
Number one draft pick every time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then it's historical. So I'd say Martin Luther King, just to pick his brain. And then probably the most challenged president of the United States. I mean, if you talk about there being a divided nation, be Lincoln. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, both sides are killing each other, right? So how did he maneuver? I did read a good book about him. It was Lincoln on Leadership and how he got
Very
through.
good.
Yeah. But yeah, just to talk to him and pick
Okay.
his brain. Yeah.
That's a pretty solid group right there.
Yeah.
All right. So you have survived
That's
our,
good questions. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
survived. I appreciate it. Survived our rapid fire. And now we're going to get into your story. So here, I want to talk about, I mean, you've had some adversities. I mean, I would be hard pressed to find another guest that we've had just on the surface in terms of as many adversities as you've had to face. But talk to us about your upbringings. You have a very unique story, especially the first 10 days of your life.
Yeah. So, I go on these mission trips and people give their testimony about how they've come to Jesus. And I would have started with, being born, and part of my adoption as an orphan for 9 months was that I'd be raised Christian and more specifically Catholic. Um, but the reality was, is it began because once my wife found my natural family, my natural mom had already passed away at that point when we found them. But um, yeah, just that, she started to show at 6 months. She came out to California and Monterey and then had me for 10 days and held me and nursed me and then had me baptized. And because there was a picture of a church in Monterey. So, um, and then from there, I had an Irish Catholic mom. She was born in Ireland and came over to the States at 21 and married my dad, couldn't have kids. So they adopted me. I could not even be here. So, um, and then, I think junior year in high school, I took an anatomy physiology class, and that was what convinced me to be a surgeon. I love working with my hands. I was tutoring two blind students in geometry, which was, you have to think in their shoes because they can't see a circle. They
Yeah.
feel. So you have to trace it for them and do those things and think outside of your own brain. And then at the very end of that year, I had a twisted intestine, ate a bunch of lasagna that my mom had made, and drank some milk, and it just settles in one loop, and that twists, and there you are throwing up, and lost 25, 30 pounds that one night throwing up.
Gosh, how painful was that?
Oh, it's horrible. I mean, it's the most painful thing I've ever gone through. So
Oh,
I was pounding on, it was a 2-story home that we were in, and pounding on the bathroom floor. My dad comes up and says, "What's up?" And I go, "I've been throwing up. My belly's bloated." And he goes, "Let me go get your mom." And mom took me to the pediatrician. He's like, "Nope, you need to go to the ER, into a room, cute nurse that is going to torture me with a nasogastric tube." So it's this like about a 1/4 inch to 3/8 of an inch tube that goes down your nose into your stomach, and you gag while you're doing it. And I'm trying to man up for this beautiful young lady, and then off to surgery. And so, but I knew before then I wanted to be a surgeon. That just kind of, this was a general surgeon. That's what I ended up becoming. Um, And then freshman year, man, I'm middle of the night. It's pitch black in a room, and the phone rings, and my roommate jumps up and grabs it, and I knew something was up because it's one word answers, and suddenly says, "It's phone's for you. It's your dad." And so my dad just said, "I don't know how to tell you. I don't know how to tell you. Your mom's passed away." And so said, "Well, I'll be right there." So my grandparents, who live in Sacramento, California, picked me up, get me to the airport, and I fly back, and I was there for probably just over a week. And Davis is a quarter system, so the classes go really quickly. Came back, my whole floor, which is all guys, said he won't come back, and I came back and I finished. And sophomore year, very beginning of sophomore year, with 18 units, organic chem, physics, biochem. I was a biochem major, biochem lab, bacteriology, stats, physics. I think I maybe have already said, but I'm coming back from bacteriology lab, and I come around the corner on the wrong side. My fault. Girl pulls out in front of me. I jackknife my wheel, go head down. I remember getting up, asking her if she's okay. Next moment is I'm sitting there on a curb, and just time had gone by. There's an ambulance in front of me. They're going to take me to the health center. I got a cut on my ear. They stitched me up. Couldn't remember my phone number until they pulled in. Like, whoa, this is bizarre.
Yeah.
And then they sent me home after some stitches in my ear. And I'm sitting there studying for my bacteriology midterm the next day. And I've got this fluid coming out of my ear. And I'm like, what is this? So I call the health center, and I think it's just covered by a grad student at night. And he's like, I don't know if that means anything. Just, you want to come in tomorrow? I'll give you an appointment. I go, well, I'll come in after my bacteriology midterm. So about 4:30, I go in, and I'm seen, and they x-ray my skull, and I've got a big crack in it. So, and I've got spinal fluid, so I'm at risk for spinal meningitis. So they admit me for almost 2 weeks, again in a 10-week quarter with all those units. And everybody's going, he'll never finish. And if I don't finish on series, 128A, 128B, 128C, and I pull that to the next quarter, I won't graduate in 4 years, and that'll totally screw up my plans of going to med school, because I already knew that's what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then junior year, my dad collapses at home. He goes in, he gets a chest x-ray. He's got a complete whiteout of one of his lungs, bunch of fluid that's bloody. That turns out to be a stage 4 lung cancer. And then he passes away between junior and senior year. So, but again, people would tell me I'll never get through it, but I did. And I got waitlisted to get into med school. Kind of a funny story. I thought my roommate was calling to, first of all, normally when you apply, apply to like 18 schools, 20 schools, and you get these thin letters if you're not in. And so I could have wallpapered my room with those rejections. So, but then I got this one day that said, it was thin, and it said, congratulations, you've not been accepted. I'm like, what? This is UC Davis. And they're like, you're on a wait list. And so I go, okay, I have a chance, still have a chance.
Yeah.
Going forward, roommate, thought was calling. I answered the phone, Craig's taxi service. And it wasn't. It was UC Davis's medical school. And I'm like, oh, well, they asked, is Craig here? I said, yeah, let me go get him just a second. Same voice. And my voice is, not like most. And same voice, I get back on and I say, hey, it's Craig. And they're like, you're in. So I got waitlisted and got in. So, I mean, these crazy adversity in my life, I was able to get through and just keep challenging myself and get in. And then luckily med school was pretty uneventful, and then got into residency at UC Davis, which was in 6 years.
So that's a lot for someone to go through, especially at a young age, because we're not older and wiser like we are now. You're young, you're your brain's still developing, you're still trying to figure out like who, and especially with so much that was going on. First part of that, like to unpack, when did you know that you were adopted? Did you always know that growing up?
Yeah, my parents didn't keep it a secret. They sat, my sister and I both were adopted, down and said, you guys are adopted. We have no qualms if you ever want to look up your family. Yeah, wouldn't hurt. Though that was a perplexing thing for me. So my wife wanted to know why I had kind of Asian looking eyes. I mean, the Asian club all invited me to be in their club, even though I knew from my mom, my grandfather had done the adoption paperwork. So I'd had names and birth dates, which helped. And then looking at obituaries and, searching newspapers and stuff, that's how my wife began the hunt. And I would have grown up in Michigan. So, yeah, it would have been an interesting life in Michigan. But, yeah, from the get-go. So, and I didn't, have a huge desire. I did want to know, but it was my wife more so. And then again, like I said, she found them. She found my mom's side first, and I spoke to my sister, and then eventually a brother who's younger than me, but he grew up the oldest, and I didn't feel comfortable reaching out. He's been the man in the house, and they finally wrote me a letter, and then a younger sister from there on that side of the family say, hey, we know about you. You've been on this calendar in a closet in my mom's room forever, saying Baby Boy Monterey, August 6th. So then I reached out to them. Yeah, and I've since gone back to family reunions and met both sides. So
How was that when you first touched base with them? Was it
it,
awkward?
it,
Was it, did it feel natural?
the first touch was with my natural father, and it was, as my wife and I would say, my eyebrows and probably my nose and hands look like him, but everything else, I'm 6'4.5", 6'5", and I'm clearly the tallest in the family. And maybe it's the California air and the swimming competitively being microgravity for a long time. But yeah, it was weird. I'd asked very deep questions, and he kind of turned to his wife, and she'd give an answer, or I just want to know about his life. And he was in the army, and he was in Hawaii, and all good things. And he's passed away since then too, which I wasn't there to be at his bedside, but I did talk to him on the phone, which was an interesting problem because he was deaf. So when I would call, his wife would repeat to him in a tone that she could hear. And then she has breast cancer and has a stroke.
Hmm.
And then she can't talk. So she can hear me fine, but now she's my translator and he can't hear, and he refuses to have me buy him a hearing aid. So those were awkward. And then he gets sick with COVID, and that was it. He had a COVID pneumonia, and that took him. So yeah, the mom's side, um, the first sister that I haven't met yet in person. But the two younger ones, Jerry and Sean, yeah, I've gone. I went to a wedding with one of my cousins that looks a lot like our oldest daughter. Yeah, so they're fun people, great people.
That's good. That's good to hear. That's good
Yeah,
to hear. And then, I mean, outside of that, your adopted mom, she had some issues with alcohol, right?
she did. I was 10 or 10ish, 11ish, and we were coming home. My dad opened the front door. I was right behind him. I could see my mom laying there on the floor without any clothes on, and that was my dad just said, "Stay here," closed the door and locked it. So my sister didn't see anything. My dad took her and put her in bed, and that's the first time I found out that she had an alcohol problem. I remember him going through the cupboards and pulling bottles of vodka out, and it kind of explained things a little bit better to me at that point, because her driving would never questionable bullet. Sometimes it would, she'd turn more slowly, or approach speeds were off. And but then I went to my first AA meeting when I was 11 with her. So I heard these people give their testimonies. My name is John, and I'm an alcoholic, and this is my story. So I think that just helped make me a better empath, taking care of people.
Yeah. How are you with alcohol? Do you drink occasionally, or?
I love whiskey. I love wine. I can drink anything. I think when my grandfather died a week before my dad did, and he lived in Sacramento, so he was close by. I'd call him every once in a while, and I was stupid. Freshman, you go to the frat parties and stuff. I go, I think I have a pretty high tolerance.
Yeah.
So, and I'm underage, so probably shouldn't have been telling him that, but I did. Proud of it. But yeah, no, I'd say I'm a social drinker.
Yeah.
You know,
I asked that because even like for myself, I saw my dad was not an alcoholic by any means, but I remember him drinking, and then my sister had issues with drugs, with smoking, with alcohol. So I've never dabbled. Even I was probably the biggest waste of a PCS to Germany.
right,
And
right,
everybody told me, they're like, "Why are you going to Germany? You don't even drink."
yeah,
I have go to wine tastings and do all that here and there, but my tolerance is about a cap full of NyQuil would pretty much
yeah,
do me in for a couple of days. So
yeah. So an interesting thing. So I love Malcolm Gladwell. He's a Canadian sociologist,
Oh yeah.
And I forget which book. I've read all of them, but there was a study, and I think it was done in Colorado, where they had babies born nature versus nurture. How much is your genes part of what you are, right? So 360 kids were born by a mom, raised by the mom. Their behavioral testing was the same the whole way through. Boys born, adopted by a mom, family, they test their behavior the whole way through, which is me. And this was kind of crushing. I am more like someone you pick off the street than my family that raised me.
Hmm.
I'm like, man, I always feel like I'm like my dad, but no, my dad was the calm, cool Bjorn Borg tennis playing kind of guy. He didn't play tennis, but that's his personality. Bad call. He just kind of look at the judge and okay, you
Yeah.
know, and then give me the 2 hour lectures of how you shouldn't argue with your mom and what's your behavior and your body language and teaching me how to be a better empath. Well, my mom was really the sounding board. So um yeah, so that was a shock to me so I, I'm really more like, so I, when I need to look to my behaviors, I need to look to my natural family, to my natural, mom, dad, drink a lot, or, those things, than my actual family that I grew up with.
Yeah. And next question I have for you is, looking back at your journey up to that point where you got into UC Davis, in hindsight, what do you think is like the biggest thing that you really learned about yourself at such a young age?
Um, I think I'll go furthest forward. So not having my parents in med school, there were a lot of guys and gals that didn't know why they were there, and it was their family. They were pushed by their parents. It wasn't for them, and so they dropped. I had 93, I think, in my class. I think I finished with 80 something. And part of that, they to kind of figure their head out, they split their second year, which was a big academic year of pathophysiology and the medicine part of science. Um, and then I think, the challenge of my mom and dad going gave me business acumen. So my dad hadn't done all the proceedings in my mom's death that needed to be done, and then the money he got from a life insurance policy invested in with 8 other people an 8 unit apartment complex. And so we, as these 8 people, along with a broker, decided we're going to, because it was going to be foreclosed on, give a bid for the first mortgage in ours, and we got it. So I learned all about real estate, and don't improve it for a year because the bankruptor can come back and go, I'm going to pay for it now. And if you've made improvements, you lose that money. So, yeah, I think it was just embracing the challenge and sucking it up and going, look, I'm going to prove people wrong. Because I mean, like I said, freshman year he's not coming back. Sophomore year he ain't going to finish on time. Junior year, now his dad's dying. He's going to quit and go home. And yeah. So, and I offered to do that. My dad said, no, he knew what I wanted to do. You have a bigger purpose in life. You need to do this.
Yeah. Seems like it taught you some resiliency too, like on the fly resiliency, like constantly, like you having to do something, not a whole lot of turnaround, time to dwell. Like,
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. Cause on medical mission trips, when we're like having our gatherings before to kind of orient people who have never gone, flexibility is your key, right? So resilience. There was one trip that's in the book that the first case is a miracle, but I kept asking for what cases I'm going to do there because it was an in-house, in-hospital thing. And half the staff, medical staff of all the hospitals in Honduras had been fired like the week before. So these people were volunteering their time to take care of 21 patients, as it turned out. But I didn't get a list until the day before we're going. And I carry all my suture, all the mesh, whatever I think I'm going to be doing, I bring with me. So I just kind of generically packed up. And then I get a list the day before and I go, okay, I need a couple more things, which is good. And then I get there and that list completely changes.
mm,
So, and each case was, you're wearing this paper gown. It's Honduras, so it's humid. even though we're inside an operating room. So it's like doing 7 hot yogas a day. I don't know if you've ever done hot yoga, but
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
yeah. So yeah, flexibility, resilience. I think you're right. That's definitely something I've learned.
Well, you mentioned the mission trips to Honduras, also to Haiti. What tell us about that? Like how you got started with that, and then like what that's meant to you to be able to do that.
I tell you, it's you see God's presence on these trips unequivocally. And that's part of the book. There are pictures that can't be explained of lights on things, lights on someone's skin that physically can't be explained. But for me, like we were at a church and the head pastor said, "Hey, we're going to Honduras. And would you like to go?" And Tim Adams, it was an anesthesiologist that I trained with at UC Davis, and he invited me along. And I'm like, "I'll be going to be your anesthesia guy. I've been there 2 years already." So he he hung out with his wife while I saw how many patients that you need to see for the week that you're there, 4 or 5 days that you're going to operate. He didn't want to put any input into it, and it was pretty light that first trip, to be honest. But it was eye opening. I mean, they don't have cautery like you have in
Yeah.
America, so I had a machine that I had to MacGyver to use because the first patient I had was a doctor's son that had something stuck in his belly button hernia that I needed to cauterize to get out of it to tuck the rest of it back in. And so I could put a clamp on it and then attach the electricity to the clamp so it conducts on the clamp and will cauterize, then cut that part that was cauterized and keep doing that across what I needed to get done.
Oh
And
wow.
then throw the clamp on the ground because now it's contaminated.
Yeah.
And I didn't touch that part. So yeah, I got it done. So but Haiti was the next trip, and that was 60 something people. And that began with going to San Francisco's airport, and they had just implemented a whole new TSA program to get the people through. And we're leaving the country, so it was a big deal. Passports, and it was 15 minutes a person. We had 2 hours to get on a plane. And God created a lightning strike storm in Dallas, which is where we were going to go next. So it shut the grid down for almost 6 hours and got everybody through.
Jeez.
Then there was an ultrasound machine that one of the OB guys brought from Kaiser Hospital. He signed it out, 40 grand. It didn't show up in Florida. He's freaking out. It showed up in Haiti. I mean, just the whole trip.
Yeah.
And the biggest miracle in Haiti was there were these 1-year-olds or less that were coming in. We were there when a hurricane was going to come through. It ended up going between Cuba and us. We were at the northwest part of Haiti. And then cholera. One of the UN teams from Asia brought in cholera, and they were coming to our clinic, 100, 300 a day at the end. And we put IVs in them and give them antibiotics. But the babies, the paramedics that were on this trip couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And so I look at this table of supplies. I go, what can I do? My hands are worthless in this. I mean, and then there's this brown box of 14 gauge solid IV or needles. I go, I can shove that through a shin. That's called an interosseous IV, or it's an interosseous line.
Mhm.
It goes in the marrow. You can give fluid and medications that's going to get back into your bloodstream and rehydrate you, or if it's a medication, treat your infection or whatever the medication is being used for. So I did that to these kids, and man, I was panicked. If you've grown up in the day and age when there were antenna on your car, a
Yeah.
hollow metal tube, if you bend that, it snaps.
Yeah.
So if I go too hard, and it's gonna be a forever in their shin. And sure enough, I never did, but it gave as it goes into the marrow. It gave, and I'm like, man, did I just poke this all the way through this little baby? And I go, no, I would have to give as much force to get through the other side. So draw it back with the syringe. You see the marrow. You start the IV fluid, rehydrate the baby, and now they got big veins. You can put a normal IV in, and that was my purpose on that trip, was to be there just to do that for those babies.
You're like an emotionally intelligent Dr. House. That's what it that's what it sounds like.
I love Dr. House.
Yeah,
He's
you're like a very composed Dr. House. So
yeah.
Um, yeah, you mentioned Dallas. There must be some sort of sign because every time I fly through Dallas, I get delayed. Every that's
Yeah.
I actually have a trip coming up soon, and that's my halfway spot. I'm like,
Oh, I think
oh,
it's better than Denver though,
so I haven't been.
or Chicago.
Oh,
Chicago, I've been there. I felt like I was in some weird movie where I was at like a wine bar, just enjoying a glass of wine, and the tables were full. And then suddenly, about every half hour, you'd see people just blink, disappear, and you hear over the PA system, "Flight so and so has been canceled." I'm like, "Oh man, I may not get out of here."
I heard if no matter if you're going to heaven or hell, you have to go through O'Hare first.
You
So
do,
yeah,
yeah,
so no, that's awesome what you're doing and have done with Haiti and Honduras. The Since we're talking about it, talk about like just being a trauma surgeon, like the amount of pressure you've kind of alluded to it with some of the stories,
yeah,
but it's not like going to work every day. And no offense to people who work at Bojangles, and I'm not trying to
yeah,
bend
yeah,
it,
yeah.
but it's not like that amount of stress where you go there and you kind of rinse repeat doing the same thing every day. There's a new challenge. You never know what's going to come through your door. And what does that do to you mentally? Like I've always wanted to ask like a surgeon, like at the end of the day, when you're checking out for the day, like how are you mentally?
Yeah, I'm okay. You have to compartmentalize,
Yeah.
especially if it's, something that's traumatic to your own. Like I had to operate on a 6-year-old that was the same age as my daughter. I've had to operate on my wife, not for trauma, but for something else. You got to be able to be like, Costner and clear the mechanism in his, I forget the name of the movie where he's throwing for a perfect game as a pitcher. But yeah, that's what I love about medicine is it's never the same thing every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so you got to be prepared for anything. And trauma, there's a whole course, ATLS, Advanced Trauma Life Support. So you learn an algorithm and an approach to trauma. A is for airway, B is for breathing. So you make sure the airway you put in. Um, and then C is for circulation, making sure that there's not an open wound that you need to tourniquet right away.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you are a first responder, so you're in the military. I've never really considered that until, I mean, COVID, they called us first responders, but um, it we are at risk for getting stuff. But I still don't think of myself as a first responder, and don't, I'm blessed because I see all that, like a car accident. If you're at the scene, that's much more guttural. You can relate to the mangled metal, the trains that collided in LA. You know, each one was smaller, and as you move further back from the impact, it got bigger and bigger. So if you were at the back, you just got thrown to the back of the train. Otherwise, if you're in the front, you were compacted in the metal. So you stay in the algorithm. The story in the book is about that 6-year-old of, you know, you it's a piece of you. It takes a piece of you when you go through that because you've opened their chest, you've opened the pericardial sac, you're doing open heart massage. Um, you run them to the operating room, you explore their belly. There's nothing there to have killed them. It's just their head, and their heart won't come back. So you then take a step back when you're done operating and you pull the drape off, and that's when it hits. You collapse. I mean, you weep. And now you've got the responsibility of going to see mom and dad. Dad's got a dropped lung, is going to need a chest tube, and mom's totally fine, doesn't have any injuries. And to tell them is horrific.
Yeah, I can't even think of what that does mentally. Like even having to go and just as you said, talk to parents and break some unfortunate news to them at times. I mean, that's something you can't read that in a Tabor's dictionary and figure out how to train yourself for it. That's got to be hard.
Yeah. And I sometimes I'll brutalize people when they'll say, and I make an incredible um, living. My wife started health coaching, and I'm like, we don't need the money. And she's like, no, but we can give more. I'm like, okay, you're right. I didn't have the abundance personality, as they call it. So, but I do now because we can, and we have things we want to do. But yeah, it's just yeah, and then doing the debriefing with paramedics afterwards, because they don't know what happens. They just drop them off and then they go and they pray and hope for the best. And
Yeah.
so yeah, it's not for everybody, but it's just it's clear to me, and it's outlined in the book of, again, how God worked through my life to get me to where I am today.
Yeah.
To be okay with that stuff and to be an empath to people, and um, be a better doc.
Yeah. And if for our listeners out there, if you hear hammering, nailing, and all this other drills going off in the background, my neighbors are getting their roof done. It's not he's operating surgery on someone at his
Yeah,
house. So just so
orthopedist. Yeah,
just so we're clear for the audio listeners out there. Uh, Next piece that I do want to ask you about is before we transition from the trauma surgeon piece, without spoiling your book, because this is perhaps in your book, most rewarding moment looking back at your surgeon career.
yeah. I think it's saving multiple people that were in multiple accident, some that needed minor procedures, um, but they had rolled their SUV into the river, and this is not in the book. Um, it made the Wall Street Journal because they were so far away from really civilization. But there's a paramedic group that had just gone by where they rolled down this hillside into the river. And there was a kayaker on a rainy day in the water that saw the whole thing roll in and was able to first respond and then go up and get the California Highway Patrol in, um, and then bring family in. There were two twins. One had a femur fracture. The other one was okay, and then had like a seizure. So those two people got driven to a level 1 trauma center, which is UC Davis, where I trained. And then the husband and wife came to me, and he had both lungs dropped. He had a ruptured spleen. He was on a blood thinner for a genetic problem, uh, a head injury, a pelvic fracture, and a femur fracture. Wasn't open. And so I got tubes in this guy, both chests. Anesthesia was there. Put a tube in his trachea to ventilate him. And once his lungs were reinflated, he could do that. Then we ran him to the OR. And this guy was in our hospital they were out of town. They were from a city that was probably 120 miles away. And I mean, just so many injuries. And I think this is probably the pivotal moment where I literally thought to myself, this guy's got it made. God had to have been in his life. There's too many coincidences in that day for that guy to have survived at this point. And literally I go, here, God, you've got the reins. Go ahead, man. You're by far better than me. And then literally within 5 seconds of thinking that way, pager goes off. He's having difficulty on the ventilator. I got to go run, see what's going on. He needs to be sedated more because he's fighting it. He's that strong. And he ended up recovering. He had a stroke from being off the blood thinner, but he completely recovered from that. And I think that's the biggest save I've had. There's an ISS score, injury severity score. I think it goes to like 75. He was at 75.
Wow. Yeah. I just couldn't even imagine some of the stuff that you've seen throughout your time, but you got to be spiritually strong as well. Talk to us
Yeah.
about the importance of that spiritual resiliency that you have.
I think it's helped me in life in a lot of ways. So one of my things I say to people is, fix the things you can fix quickly and the ones you can't, pray about, right? Because you don't have control over it, right? So when you're in a storm, you're in a trial, and it's bigger than you, then you got to turn to God. That's what I do. And he shows up. I mean, there's stories in the Bible about, Jonathan, who's King Saul's son, and they're in camp, and they've got one sword. That's it for, I don't know, 15,000 guys. And they're going to go in a valley and climb up this uh, hillside to go fight, I think it's the Philistines. And Jonathan gets a bug up his rear, and he's decided he's just take his armor bearer and we're going to go fight him. And then, God stops him and tells him, look, this battle's bigger than you. And so he says to his armor bearer, hey, if they tell us to go back, because they're higher ground than we are, we'll go back. If they say come on up, we come on up. Sure enough, they kill a bunch of people, like 20 within a minute or two. That freaks everybody out, and they start killing themselves. So God will act, and hopefully not that way in your world, but he's there, and that's part of the book. I mean, it's the miracles are there; they can't be explained. God's around. So whether you think of a different higher power, I'm Christian, so you could be Muslim, you could be Buddhist. I think interesting thing. Junior year, I think I had in English to read Siddhartha, which is about Buddha. So God's just been there. You got to look back at coincidences and lucky, any of those things, and rethink what those were. That could have been God. Yeah.
Speaking of miracles and things that have happened and God's signs of looking out for you have been there, talk about the fire with your apartment.
Oh, so I was going through separation, then divorce. It was 8 to almost 9 years. I'm away from my 3 oldest kids, and in an apartment. And I'm back playing Masters water polo, and the team is at a local college, and it's a Saturday. I'm thinking, this is just a beautiful day. I'm going to go play from 8 to 10. We're going to go eat, or from 10 to noon. At noon, we're going to go eat, and then I've got free preseason tickets to the Raiders 49ers game. It is a beautiful day. I get out of the pool. My pager had gone off. One's the hospital. I call them. Yeah, they had a question about an order. And then the other was my apartment manager. And she says, I don't know how to tell you this, but your apartment is burnt down. I'm like, wait, what do you mean my apartment? I mean, the whole thing, everything's gone? Yeah, pretty much. But I think everything around it's okay. And so I come, I see 2 rows of two piles. One's still smoldering and completely gone, wasted stuff. The other one's maybe salvageable. And I asked the manager, I go, so, did anybody get hurt? Is there, and she says, no, you're second story at the very end. So there's someone underneath me. There's someone on my left. There's someone behind on the other side of my apartment. None of that was intruded. No one had to move. No one had to do anything. I had to find some place to stay. And then the fire department looked, and they determined it came from a dresser, something on the dresser. I don't burn candles. I don't have incense. I don't do anything like that. There's no matches. There was an answering machine. On the top of that, there were papers, and then there were more papers, and then there was books, and then a solid cherry wood dresser. I'd opened my window because it was a beautiful day in that room, left the door open. There was a balcony in the next room over. I opened that, so there was a current. So it was, if I had not done any of those things, there wouldn't have been a flow of air to feed the fire. My buddy who played with me on our team called me when I was at a Nordstrom's getting all the clothing because it was gone. He goes, hey, did they ever figure out how the fire happened? I go, yeah, it was the dresser, and it was the answering machine because you could see the cord. He goes, oh, no. And I go, what? He goes, oh, no. I called your house instead of your cell phone when you were a little late that day, and it was garbled. I think I burnt your apartment down. And sure enough, I gave him grief about that from that day on. There was a set of Wells Fargo checks that survived because they're in a stack, but the edges were all singed. They looked really cool. I mean, that would be a cool, and it still smelled like a fire. So when I have to write my dues for the water polo team, I'd write this out and go, here's one of my burnt checks. And someone would usually be around it, and I'd tell the story of how Jay burnt my apartment down. Yeah, but it purged pretty much. But there were some things that were spared. Actually, if you're not on screen, there's a letterbox right above me where I'm speaking today. There's a letter that I'd written to my dad before he'd passed away, and that survived. There were a blanket that my mom had crocheted that was singed on a couple of ends, but that survived, a miracle. Yeah, so there were things that survived that fire that shouldn't have. And again, that's another miracle in my life that you can't account for.
Wow. No, that's crazy to hear that. And before we get into your book, I want to ask you this question because I'm real curious. So for you, you mentioned your natural parents and then your adopted parents.
Right.
How do you define family? Because I think that looks different for everybody. We even talk about like our military family. What is your definition of family?
Yeah, so that was a trial for me because I was completely loyal to my family, who were the ones that raised me. So and they said, no problem, look for your family, all that stuff. But they'd passed away when I was 20. So from 21 on, you know, we hadn't found them. It wasn't until probably 12 years ago or so. But so I struggled once we knew where they were and reached out. I'm like, I'd go visit, and it was great to hear stories and meet them, and I love them. They are family to me now. But you're right. There's that gap of, look, they weren't around for the pranks I pulled on my sister, or the death of my mom and dad, and it wasn't like I could go. I even on the backpack trip that I talked about, heights. Um, I asked those guys to go, man, I'm struggling with this. Do I go meet him? Do I meet my dad? Do I meet my father? And they're like, you owe it to him. And it was great. I mean, he was married a couple times, and he had like four girls. He never had a son. He didn't know. All he knew was that he gave her money and she took care of it. So to hear me that first time that he had a son was huge. And I mean, yeah, they are family now. Obviously, I've been to um, wedding, and I've been to reunions and stuff like that. COVID kind of shut that down for a while, but yeah, they're there. And like Sean's son looks a lot like I did when I was that age. So it's interesting to see the genes.
Well, speaking of stories, you got a book. So
I do.
tell our listeners about your book. Where can they find it? And then the last two miracles of your grandmother's life and how you dedicated this book there. I know that was like a
Yeah,
very
yeah,
loaded
yeah.
question.
So for 15 years, my grandmother was saying, "Hey, look, you've been through a lot. You need to write it and publish it." So before she passed away, which was 2021, um, I started writing it. I went to a Grant Cardone 10X conference, and like four people go, "Man, you've got." They didn't even know me. They're like, "You need to get on that stage and talk. You need to be inspirational and talk." And on a Boy Scout trip, this big camp in West Virginia, same thing. This lady's, "You need to put that in your book." I'm like, well, "How do you know I'm writing a book?" And so I got the rough drafts done. She got to read a lot of it before she passed away. But then once she's passed away, I got it finished. And so, but the miracles that she left, I was there for the last 2 weeks of her life. Just basically moved in. She was an attorney, one of four women that graduated from UC Berkeley's Bolt Hall in 1959. So highly discriminated against as a female, but always this bright light. I mean, she just was. She had arthritis in her fingers and couldn't bake cookies or do knitting. She did this knitting. Um, just an incredible spirit. And she passes at 10:31 at night. She had this clock that she just loved. It was given to her by my grandfather, I think from Switzerland, and it would chime once on like 10:30, 11:30. It would chime the number for the hour, and she had to have it fixed because it broke before she, 2 months before she was really starting to get sick. But it chimed, and so she died right after it chimed, 10:31. And I'm cleaning the room literally 3 days later, and the clock stopped at 10:31. And then to be just sure, that she wanted me to remember. I'm in the guest bathroom. I'm washing my face, shaving, and there's a stool right next to me, and on there's a book. Clearly, she's been there. Her glasses were on there. There's a bookmark. She's clearly going to come back and read that, and it's titled "Gone Missing." Thank you, Grandma.
It's like such a heartwarming story there, especially
Yeah,
with everything you've been through, the highs and lows with family. To have that sense of closure is
yeah, yeah.
makes for an
And
incredible story. But yet,
yeah.
tell us about the book and where can they find it?
So Amazon's a place. Just put my name in there, Craig Thayer, and then put saved. It should pop up in the book section, and then you can just order it from there. Or if you go to my website, which is just craigthayer.net, there's icons you can click on there that will help you order it. It'll just send you straight to Amazon to order it. So, and the website also is just showing what I'm doing. I'm I didn't learn that I was dyslexic until our youngest, who's now 16, was diagnosed years back, almost 8, I think. Um, that oh yeah, okay, and it's part of the story in the book. But yeah, so I put a Facebook survey out there. Hey, should I do an Audible? And if I do, should it be me? And except for one friend out of high school who wanted Coyote to do the Audible, the narrator. So I did it. I got it done about a week ago. I haven't seen if there's any edits yet, but man, I tell you, I felt like a guy who's got polio with a shrunken leg. And as long as I'm doing walking around, it's not a disability. It's not a challenge in any way. But if someone told me I had to run it, it's going to be. So yeah, reading, especially, I would swear at myself, like, who wrote this damn book? Because if I use a really long sentence, it would be great for the first third, and then I'd chop it and like be horrible, and then miss words or whatever, and I'm like, okay, and I get 2/3 okay, and then I get all of it okay. So yeah, it was fun. It got
Oh,
done.
I always like when someone does their own audiobook. I think the first one I heard was Coach Darlene Santori. She said she got rejected for her own book, her own audio book. She's like, you talk about discouraging.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
told
yeah.
that you
That would
can't
be.
you can't read for your own uh, body of work that you got out there. But no,
Yeah,
that's awesome, and we'll definitely have the link in our episode description. We'll have the book under our resource recommendations on the website and on our Instagram and Facebook pages. Before we wrap this up, I do have one question. You mentioned, reading disorder. It wasn't diagnosed until you were 55 years old. How
right.
in the world did you go that long without
I
that?
tell you, I never thought. I just felt like I read slow.
Right.
And in the book, it'll talk about third grade. And I
That's the
walk into
worst, having to read
class.
out loud. Craig,
It's
please
dimly
read
lit.
page 4 for us.
Yeah, dimly lit, and they're doing your word speed, right? And so all these girls are kicking butt, and I get up there, I feel like my pants have fallen to my ankles, and standing there in my tidy whities, I'm jumping, skipping lines. Within a week, I moved to a different third grade class. So, and then since, I mean, I take tests every 6 months, and the first thing I do is I read how much time, how many questions, how much per question, and I sweat more about that to finish than I do the exam. So it's like it's distracting, and but I get through it. I don't think there's a test that I have not finished in time.
Well, good thing
So
is when you're doing surgery, you're not reading Lion Witch in the wardrobe out loud.
right,
So,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, true.
Okay. And you got through medical school, so you did something right.
Yeah, yeah. You
Yeah.
got to take 8-hour exams. Your MCATs, your um, the boards. I did them at San Francisco at the airport, and there was, I don't know, probably 400 kids in this one room. You get 4 hours, then a break, and 4 hours. And one of the guys came back 2 hours into the last part of the exam. He's sitting in front. It's these like big tables that have white tablecloths, and he starts to throw up. Totally distracting. It's like he's bringing more and more of the tablecloth around his face. I mean, he thought his life was over, because he's not going to be board certified. So, yeah, felt for him. But yeah, we're definitely masters at test taking.
Well, you've had a crazy story, and you kind of embody everything that this podcast is about, with taking those shadows and cloaking ourselves with them versus running from everything that's happened to us and letting it absolutely eat us up. You have done very well for yourself. And when all is said and done, when people mention your name, what do you want your legacy to be 50 years from now?
I want people to know that I was here to serve and not be served. That time of day, 2 o'clock to me is either light or dark. I'm there for people. I make that offer now. I say that when I work with people that, um, if you've got my phone number, give me a call. If you have medical questions, family member, friend, I don't care. I didn't go to 14 years of school and then do like 32 years of training now to not spread that knowledge. So, yeah. And then this is just a different avenue. I feel like another calling now, still operating, but it's getting on stage to speak and talk to people, whether it's one or two or a crowd of 5,000 surgeons. So,
Well, I definitely want to thank you for taking time to do this episode here today. One more time, folks. Craig Thayer, Craig, THAYER.net. Head over there. Also, head over to Amazon, saved, get a copy of the book. I mean, if it's anything like these stories that you've been sharing here on this episode, definitely want to get your hands on that. And next week, we return with another amazing episode. If you like what we're doing here, please head over to Apple, to Spotify, to theshadowspodcast.com. Leave us a review. It really does help us out. We appreciate everybody who's gone on there and done so. And until next week, we will see you on another episode of the Shadows Podcast.